It was another busy Tuesday morning at the sleek glass and steel offices of Langford Enterprises, and Emma, the young and efficient executive assistant, was juggling her usual avalanche of emails, calendar updates, and client calls. Her boss, Daniel Langford, the notoriously handsome and high-powered CEO, had a reputation for being demanding, yet there was an undeniable charm about him that made people drawn to him, Emma included, though she would never admit it out loud. That morning had started like any other, with the hum of printers, ringing phones, and the clatter of high heels across polished floors, but Emma felt an unusual nervous energy as she prepared for the day. Today, Daniel had scheduled a high-profile meeting with potential investors, and she had spent the early hours coordinating everything, down to the exact placement of pens and notepads in the boardroom. Just before she stepped out to grab her coffee, she realized her outfit, though professional, didn't feel quite right under the bright office lights. Maybe the blazer was too stiff, the blouse slightly off, and her instincts whispered that she looked too plain for the executive floor. With a small sigh, she quickly snapped a selfie in the mirror of the staff bathroom, hoping to get a second opinion without involving anyone else, and texted it to Daniel with the casual message, "Does this look okay?" She knew it was a bit bold to send a photo like that. After all, it was purely professional, or so she convinced herself, but the thought of getting Daniel's direct input, though a little nerve-wracking, felt strangely thrilling. Seconds later, her phone buzzed. Daniel had replied with just one word, "Where?" Her heart skipped a beat. She blinked at the message, rereading it to make sure she hadn't imagined it. Where? What did he mean? The ambiguity made her stomach twist, a mixture of anticipation and dread. Before she could even type a response, there was a soft knock on the bathroom door. "Emma, are you in there?" Daniel's deep, calm voice filtered through, sending a jolt through her entire body. Her first reaction was disbelief. How could he know she was in the bathroom? Then came a surge of embarrassment. She hadn't expected him to actually show up, and now, she was caught mid-selfie, a little too aware of every detail of her appearance. She quickly grabbed her phone, fumbled with the lock screen, and opened the door, trying to compose herself, but Daniel was already leaning casually against the doorframe, a small, almost mischievous smile playing on his lips. "You asked if it looked okay," he said, his tone neutral but with a glint of curiosity, and for a moment, Emma couldn't find her voice. She realized that this was not just about the outfit. There was an unspoken connection, a tension she hadn't expected, as if the air between them had shifted in the fraction of a second he appeared. Daniel's eyes scanned her quickly, professional yet oddly personal, as if he was assessing not just her appearance but her presence, her confidence, her very energy. Emma cleared her throat, forcing a smile, trying to laugh it off. I just wanted a quick second opinion," she said, trying to keep it casual, but her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her blouse, betraying her nervousness. He raised an eyebrow, still leaning there, and simply said, "You look fine. But, if you're asking me, maybe you wanted me to see it in person." The words, casual as they seemed, carried an edge that made her pulse race. She realized she was standing way too close to him now, heart hammering, aware of every detail. The crisp lines of his tailored suit, the faint scent of his cologne, the quiet confidence in his posture that made the bustling office floor outside fade into irrelevance. Emma's mind scrambled for a response, for some witty, professional comeback, but all that came out was a soft, I guess I just wanted to make sure I looked presentable for the meeting." Daniel's gaze softened slightly, and he gave a small, approving nod, but his eyes lingered on her just a moment longer than necessary. Then, almost effortlessly, he said, "Well, you look ready to impress. Now, how about we grab a coffee before the chaos begins? I have a feeling we both need a little sanity before the boardroom storm." Emma blinked, surprised at the invitation, but a smile spread across her face. "Coffee sounds perfect," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady even as her stomach did somersaults. As they walked side by side toward the office cafe, the casual conversation about schedules and investor notes felt layered with unspoken tension. Every glance, every laugh, even the subtle brush of shoulders as they navigated through the hallways, seemed charged with a new energy. Emma realized, with a mix of excitement and trepidation, that this was no ordinary day, and Daniel's unexpected appearance at her dressing room had just shifted the entire dynamic between them. What had started as a simple question about an outfit had turned into a silent acknowledgement of something more. Something neither of them had explicitly addressed but both felt deeply, and as the coffee machine hissed and the aroma of roasted beans filled the air, Emma couldn't help but wonder what other surprises the day had in store, and whether she was ready for them. The day continued with its usual rhythm of meetings, conference calls, and client briefings, but for Emma, time seemed to stretch and warp around Daniel in ways that made it hard to focus on anything else. Every glance he threw her way, even across a crowded boardroom, felt loaded with meaning she couldn't quite place, and yet she couldn't deny the thrill that ran through her each time he did. During the investor presentation, she found herself subtly adjusting her notes, making sure her hands weren't trembling, and catching his eye just long enough to receive a small nod of reassurance that made her heart leap. Daniel, for his part, maintained his usual commanding presence, articulate and confident, but there were moments when he looked at her not just as his assistant but almost as if he were seeing her in a new light, noticing the way she carried herself under pressure, the way she handled the chaos with calm precision, and the quiet determination in her eyes that he had perhaps never truly appreciated before. Between the back-to-back meetings, there were fleeting moments of interaction that felt almost electric, a hand brushing hers as they exchanged documents, a whispered comment about the timing of a client call, a brief shared smile over a particularly ridiculous spreadsheet error. Each moment was tiny, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to Emma, it was like a language of its own, unspoken yet profoundly intimate. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion began to set in, but Daniel insisted on a short break, suggesting they step into the office lounge for a quick coffee, away from the hum of the floor. As they walked, their shoulders occasionally bumped, and Emma felt a flush creeping up her neck that she struggled to hide, hoping her expression remained composed. Once in the lounge, Daniel poured them each a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, a casual stance that somehow seemed deliberate, as if he were taking a moment to study her, to enjoy her presence in a way that went beyond the ordinary professional relationship. Emma set her cup down, suddenly hyper-aware of how close they were standing, and tried to focus on her notes, pretending to check the schedule for upcoming meetings, but her mind kept drifting back to that brief, charged encounter in the bathroom that morning. She could still feel the echo of his gaze, the subtle tension that had risen between them, and she realized that something had shifted in the dynamic they shared. Daniel spoke about the upcoming client dinner that evening, casually asking if she had arranged the final seating chart, and she responded with precise details, but every word felt layered, weighted with a sense of awareness she couldn't quite name. It wasn't just about logistics anymore. It was about presence, connection, and perhaps the beginning of a curiosity neither of them had fully explored. As the afternoon dragged on, Emma found herself walking back to her desk, carrying a stack of reports, and noticing that Daniel had returned to his office, doors slightly ajar, giving him a commanding presence even in brief glimpses. She paused for a moment, realizing how often she watched him without intending to, noting the way he moved, the way he interacted with staff, the confidence that seemed effortless yet magnetic. Then her phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. Quick question, can you come by my office? Her heart skipped, partly from anticipation, partly from anxiety. She took a deep breath, smoothed her blouse, and knocked gently before entering, finding him seated behind his sleek, modern desk, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Yes, she asked, trying to sound composed, professional. I was reviewing the presentation deck, he began, leaning back slightly, and I realized there's one slide that could use your insight. Mind taking a look? She nodded and moved closer, laying the stack of reports on the desk, but as she bent slightly to point at a chart, their proximity made the air feel charged again. Daniel's gaze met hers, steady and intent, and for a brief moment, words seemed unnecessary. She felt a rush of warmth and awareness that made her conscious of her every movement, yet she also felt an odd comfort in his calm presence. I think if we tweak this section here, it will make the pitch stronger, she said, gesturing with confidence, and he leaned in, examining the chart, their shoulders almost touching. There was a pause, a quiet interlude where the noise of the office felt miles away, and Emma realized that the simple act of working together had become infused with something unspoken, a subtle intimacy that neither had labeled but both were aware of. Daniel straightened, offering her an approving nod, and said, "Excellent work, Emma. As always, you make everything run smoother." The compliment was professional on the surface, but there was a warmth in his tone that made her cheeks flush. She smiled, attempting modesty, but couldn't ignore the flutter in her chest. Later in the afternoon, a series of minor emergencies pulled her attention away, calls from clients, a miscommunication with the catering service for the evening event, but throughout it all, Daniel kept popping up with casual remarks, small gestures that kept her alert and slightly off balance. Each interaction was harmless on the surface, yet somehow charged with a magnetic tension that left Emma both excited and nervous. Finally, the workday began to wind down, and the office slowly emptied as employees filtered out, leaving the sleek glass floors shimmering in the late afternoon light. Daniel appeared at her desk again, holding 2 freshly brewed coffees. "For the road," he said with a small smile, handing one to her. She accepted it, warmth from the cup seeping into her hands, and felt a strange sense of comfort in the gesture. "You've had a long day," he said, casually, yet not so casually that it went unnoticed. "Thank you," she replied softly, feeling the closeness again as he leaned just slightly against her desk. Then, as if on impulse, he added, "By the way, about this morning. I meant what I said. You looked ready to impress. Not just the outfit." Emma blinked, caught off guard by the seemingly innocent comment, but it carried a weight that made her heart race. Was he referring to her confidence, her presence, or something deeper that she hadn't acknowledged? She didn't answer immediately, instead offering a shy smile, unsure of how to articulate the sudden flood of thoughts and emotions. Daniel's expression softened, and he nodded, a subtle acknowledgement of the connection they both sensed but hadn't yet defined. As the final hour of the day approached, the office quieted down, and Emma realized that her relationship with Daniel had shifted irrevocably. The day had been filled with tasks, deadlines, and meetings, but amidst all of that, there had been something else, a tension, a curiosity, a silent game of proximity and awareness that neither of them had chosen but both were now entangled in. As she packed her things, preparing for the evening's client dinner, she felt a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation, wondering how the night might unfold, and whether the subtle sparks of the day would ignite into something neither of them could ignore. The evening brought with it a different energy altogether, as the city lights outside the office windows glimmered like distant stars, and the gentle hum of traffic created a soundtrack that felt both calming and electric. Emma adjusted her blazer one last time, making sure her outfit looked polished and professional, yet she couldn't ignore the slight nervous flutter in her stomach as she thought about the client dinner ahead and, more importantly, about Daniel, who seemed to have a knack for making ordinary moments feel charged with unspoken tension. As she stepped into the sleek black car waiting in the building's driveway, Daniel was already inside, casually leaning back in his seat, scrolling through his tablet with an air of calm authority, yet every so often glancing up at her with a small, knowing smile that sent another jolt of awareness through her. "Evening," he said lightly as she slid into the passenger seat, offering a hand to steady herself as she closed the door, though it was purely professional, or at least that was what she kept telling herself. She smiled nervously in return, and for a brief moment, the quiet of the car felt like its own universe, separate from the pressures of the office. On the way to the restaurant, their conversation flowed effortlessly between logistics, menu options, and casual office banter, yet beneath the surface, each sentence seemed to carry an unspoken subtext, an awareness of the proximity between them, the subtle brush of her arm against his as she reached for her seatbelt, the way he occasionally leaned slightly closer to hand her documents or make a passing comment. Emma found herself acutely conscious of his presence, of the way he exuded confidence without seeming to try, of the quiet magnetism that made her pulse race even in moments of apparent mundane conversation. When they arrived at the restaurant, a modern, upscale venue with warm lighting and soft music, they were greeted by the maitre d', and Daniel's calm demeanor immediately set the tone, while Emma felt a rush of nerves as she navigated the floor in his shadow, realizing that tonight she wasn't just representing herself, but the company, and somehow, without explicitly stating it, she also felt like she was representing the connection they had started to form over the past few days. Once seated, Daniel and Emma exchanged quick glances over the menus, a brief acknowledgement of the morning's encounter in the dressing room and the subtle interactions throughout the day. Their conversation began with professional topics, discussing investor concerns, potential expansions, and strategic priorities, but it gradually shifted to lighter topics, the latest books they were reading, favorite travel destinations, and anecdotes from past experiences in the corporate world. Each laugh, each smile, felt intimate, a shared understanding that was new yet strangely comforting, and Emma noticed that Daniel's focus seemed less on the work tonight and more on her presence, on making sure she was engaged, comfortable, and included in the dialogue, as if valuing her beyond the role of assistant, as if seeing her as a person he genuinely wanted to connect with. The appetizers arrived, and for a moment, Emma lost herself in the taste and the atmosphere, but Daniel's attention never wavered. He leaned slightly across the table to make a comment, and the movement made her keenly aware of the subtle tension between them, a tension that was thrilling yet entirely appropriate for the setting, professional yet undeniably charged. She found herself smiling more than usual, laughing at his dry humor, and noticing the way he gestured with his hands, the ease with which he navigated conversation, and the quiet confidence that made people naturally drawn to him. There were moments of silence too, comfortable pauses that felt like a private space shared just between the two of them, moments when she realized that she was no longer just thinking about her professional role but about the possibilities of what this connection could mean if nurtured carefully. Daniel asked about her interests outside work, and she found herself sharing more than she normally would with a boss, anecdotes about hobbies, small dreams, and personal preferences, and he listened attentively, making her feel heard in a way that was rare in professional settings. As the main course was served, the conversation turned to lighter, playful teasing, Daniel commenting on her surprisingly strong opinions about wine pairings, Emma joking about his habit of always choosing the boldest dishes, and each exchange carried a subtle undercurrent of flirtation that neither could deny. She felt herself leaning in slightly when he spoke, captivated not only by his words but by the magnetic presence he carried effortlessly. At one point, a waiter brought a small complimentary dessert, and Daniel used the moment to casually comment on the balance of flavors, while Emma caught herself noticing the way his eyes lingered on her when he smiled, an expression that was both approving and personal, and she felt an internal tug of excitement and caution at the same time. After dinner, Daniel suggested a short walk to help digest the meal, and they stepped out into the crisp evening air, the city lights reflecting off the pavement and casting a warm glow around them. Emma noticed that the city felt quieter here, away from the hum of traffic, almost as if the night itself was conspiring to create a private moment for them. Their steps fell in sync as they navigated the sidewalks, occasional laughter spilling between them, and for a moment, she realized she was genuinely enjoying a rare sense of companionship that went beyond professional boundaries but had not yet crossed any line that would make her uncomfortable. Then, almost casually, Daniel slowed his pace, turning slightly toward her. "You handled today exceptionally well," he said, his tone sincere, and she felt a rush of pride and warmth, realizing that his recognition wasn't just about the tasks she completed but about her presence, her poise, her intelligence. She responded with a soft, grateful smile, feeling the weight of the compliment in a way that went beyond ordinary office interactions. There was a brief pause, and the quiet of the evening seemed to accentuate the subtle intensity between them, the kind that wasn't spoken but deeply felt, a shared acknowledgement of curiosity, connection, and something that neither had fully defined but both sensed growing stronger with each passing moment. As they walked back toward the car, Daniel made a lighthearted comment about the unpredictable nature of high-level business meetings, and Emma laughed, appreciating his ability to balance professionalism with a personal touch. She realized that the day, which had started with a simple question about her outfit, had evolved into an experience that made her see Daniel in a new light, a man who was not only a powerful CEO but also someone who noticed, appreciated, and subtly encouraged her, creating a dynamic that was both exhilarating and grounding at the same time. By the time they reached the car, the city lights flickering around them, Emma felt a sense of anticipation for what tomorrow might bring, a quiet excitement that she could neither ignore nor fully articulate, and she realized that the morning's fleeting bathroom encounter had set in motion a series of moments that were now shaping a connection between them, professional yet charged, respectful yet deeply engaging, and entirely unexpected in its depth and intensity. The following morning, the office had a different rhythm, one that seemed infused with the memory of the previous night, and Emma arrived slightly earlier than usual, clutching her coffee as the sunlight streamed through the towering glass windows, casting long, warm shadows across the polished floors. She felt a flutter of anticipation she couldn't quite shake, a quiet curiosity about whether Daniel would mention the dinner, acknowledge the subtle connection they had built, or simply carry on as if nothing had changed. Yet deep down, she knew that something had shifted between them, and that shift made her both excited and nervously vigilant. As she passed through the reception area, she noticed Daniel already at his desk, reviewing reports with his usual intensity, the faint lines of concentration softening whenever he glanced up and caught her eye. Their gaze met for a brief second, a silent acknowledgement of the evening before, and Emma felt her pulse quicken in a way that was both thrilling and grounding, realizing that even in the midst of corporate chaos, their connection had its own quiet presence. The morning meetings began, starting with a strategy session on upcoming projects, and Emma found herself unusually aware of every subtle gesture Daniel made, the tilt of his head, the slight arch of his eyebrow, the way he emphasized points during discussions, and the occasional glance in her direction that seemed to linger just a fraction longer than professional necessity required. She was grateful for the tasks at hand, as they provided a distraction from the thoughts swirling in her mind, but even during moments of intense focus, she couldn't shake the awareness of his presence, of the energy between them, of the quiet tension that had begun to define their interactions in a way that was exciting yet perfectly safe for the office environment. During a brief break, Daniel approached her desk with a folder in hand, and as he leaned over to place it in front of her, Emma felt the subtle warmth of his shoulder near hers, a sensation that sent a quiet thrill down her spine. "I thought you might want to review these before the board meeting," he said, his tone professional yet softened by a hint of familiarity, and Emma nodded, her hands brushing against his as she accepted the folder, feeling a momentary jolt of awareness that made her cheeks warm. As the morning progressed, their interactions continued in a delicate balance of professional engagement and subtle, almost imperceptible personal connection. Every shared glance, every brief comment, and every collaborative effort carried with it an undercurrent of tension that was unspoken yet palpable, a silent acknowledgement of curiosity, interest, and mutual respect. Emma found herself working with heightened attention to detail, not just because of the tasks at hand, but because she wanted to impress Daniel in ways that felt meaningful beyond the standard expectations of her role, and she noticed, with quiet satisfaction, that he seemed to notice too, offering small nods of approval, brief smiles, and occasional words of encouragement that felt layered with intent. By midday, the office hummed with the energy of deadlines and productivity, yet amidst the controlled chaos, Emma caught herself stealing glances at Daniel across the room, noticing the way he handled client calls with confidence, the subtle mannerisms that revealed both his professionalism and his approachable nature, and the way he seemed attuned to her presence even when focused on other tasks. During a quick check-in on the upcoming presentation, Daniel approached her desk once again, this time leaning casually against the edge, his proximity both natural and charged with an unspoken energy. "I wanted to discuss the new proposal," he said, his voice calm yet attentive, and as they bent over the documents together, Emma felt the air around them subtly shift, the professional context blending seamlessly with the quiet awareness of their connection. Her pulse quickened, not from fear but from an unexpected sense of anticipation and engagement, as if every interaction, no matter how routine, had gained a new layer of meaning. Lunch arrived in the form of a catered spread in the conference room, and Daniel insisted they review the latest client feedback while they ate. As they sat side by side, passing documents back and forth, Emma noticed the small gestures that made her heart race, the way he adjusted the angle of the folder to make it easier for her to read, the slight brush of his fingers against hers as they exchanged pens, the quiet attentiveness in his voice when he asked her opinion on certain slides. Each detail, mundane to an outside observer, was electric to her, a quiet reminder of the subtle tension that had grown between them, a tension that was exciting, professional, and entirely safe, yet undeniably present. The afternoon brought with it more meetings, presentations, and impromptu discussions, yet throughout it all, Daniel's awareness of Emma's presence remained constant, not in a controlling or intrusive way, but in a manner that made her feel valued, noticed, and connected in ways that transcended the ordinary bounds of office dynamics. At one point, a client question required a quick solution, and Daniel and Emma worked seamlessly together, their collaboration smooth and efficient, yet Emma couldn't help but notice the fleeting moments where their eyes met, subtle smiles exchanged, and the silent communication that had grown between them over the past few days. By late afternoon, the office had begun to quiet down, the energy of the day replaced by a gentle hum as employees wrapped up tasks and prepared to leave. Daniel returned to her desk with a small stack of reports, handing them to her with a brief comment, "Great work today. I appreciate your attention to detail." The words were professional, yet there was a warmth in his tone that made Emma's chest tighten with quiet satisfaction and a lingering awareness of their growing connection. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the office, Emma realized that what had started as a simple morning exchange over a selfie had evolved into a layered and meaningful relationship of sorts, professional, respectful, yet undeniably tinged with curiosity, subtle tension, and mutual admiration. She packed her bag, preparing to leave for the evening, yet found herself pausing, wondering if Daniel would offer a word, a gesture, or a small invitation, anything that would acknowledge the new rhythm between them. Sure enough, as she approached the elevator, Daniel appeared just behind her, offering a casual smile. "Heading out?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, returning the smile, feeling the same quiet excitement she had felt during the past few days. "Good. Tomorrow will be another long one, but I have a feeling we'll handle it well," he said, his tone light yet affirming, and as the elevator doors closed, Emma felt a sense of anticipation for the days ahead, a realization that the professional environment they shared had quietly transformed into a space where subtle connections, unspoken tensions, and mutual respect created a backdrop for something uniquely engaging, thrilling, and entirely their own. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office with a mix of anticipation and nerves, her mind still replaying the subtle interactions she'd shared with Daniel over the past few days, and though she tried to focus on her usual routine, checking emails, organizing schedules, and preparing the boardroom for the morning briefing, she couldn't help but notice how acutely aware she had become of every detail about him, from the way he walked down the hallway to the faint, confident tone in his voice when he greeted the team. It was as though the simple act of being in the same office had shifted into a delicate dance, one where unspoken tension and mutual awareness coexisted with the demands of corporate life, making each interaction feel both ordinary and charged. As she entered the main office space, she caught Daniel reviewing reports at his desk, the late morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows casting a halo of gold around his dark, tailored suit, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to appreciate the effortless command he had over the room, the calm authority that drew people in, and the subtle warmth in his eyes whenever they met hers. The day began with a strategic planning session, and Emma noticed that Daniel seemed unusually attentive to her contributions, nodding thoughtfully at her suggestions, occasionally pausing to ask for clarification, and giving a level of consideration that made her feel both respected and quietly exhilarated. It was a professional respect layered with a subtle awareness, an acknowledgement of her presence that neither of them had yet named but both clearly recognized. During a mid-morning break, Emma stepped into the lounge to grab a cup of coffee, only to find Daniel already there, casually reviewing the agenda for the upcoming board meeting. "Morning," he said, offering a small smile that made her pulse quicken, and for a moment, the hum of the office felt distant, leaving them in a bubble of quiet familiarity. She returned the greeting, trying to mask the flutter of excitement that ran through her, and they exchanged a few light words about schedules, client calls, and the unexpected shift in meeting times, yet beneath the surface, there was an unspoken rhythm developing, a silent communication that neither had fully defined but both were aware of, a subtle dance of proximity and attention. By noon, the tension between them had grown just slightly more palpable, each glance and small interaction carrying an undercurrent of curiosity and engagement. As they navigated the boardroom setup, passing folders and charts back and forth, Emma noticed how Daniel's attention seemed almost magnetic, focusing not only on the documents but on the way she engaged with him, the confidence in her posture, the sharpness of her insights, and the quiet professionalism that belied the fluttering awareness she felt inside. After lunch, the office quieted down as employees returned to their desks, and Emma found herself working closely with Daniel on a presentation for a potential high-profile client. As they bent over charts and slides, reviewing every detail, there was a subtle electricity in the air, not inappropriate, but deeply engaging, a sense of connection that went beyond normal workplace collaboration. Every time their hands brushed while adjusting a slide or exchanging pens, Emma felt a slight jolt of awareness, a reminder that their relationship, professional as it was, had gained a new layer of intimacy, one defined by mutual respect, shared purpose, and an unspoken curiosity about each other. The afternoon brought a flurry of tasks, client emails, and impromptu conference calls, yet through it all, Daniel's attention to her presence remained constant, subtle yet undeniable, making her feel simultaneously noticed and valued, as if her contributions and her very presence mattered in a way that went beyond ordinary office dynamics. As the day began to wind down, Daniel approached her desk with a folder of documents, placing it gently in front of her. "I want you to review these before tomorrow morning," he said, his tone professional yet imbued with a quiet warmth that made Emma's heart skip a beat, and she nodded, accepting the responsibility with a sense of pride and anticipation. They exchanged a few brief words about deadlines and priorities, each sentence layered with the familiarity that had begun to define their interactions, and when Daniel finally turned to leave, he paused at the doorway, giving her a small, almost imperceptible smile that conveyed acknowledgement, appreciation, and a subtle intrigue, all without a single word being said explicitly. Emma watched him go, feeling a mix of excitement and nervous energy, aware that the unspoken connection they shared had deepened, strengthened by shared tasks, quiet acknowledgements, and the everyday rhythm of professional life. By the time she prepared to leave for the evening, she noticed a text from Daniel on her phone, See you tomorrow, early briefing. Coffee first. Her heart lifted at the simple message, and she quickly typed back, confirming her presence, feeling a sense of anticipation for the continued interactions that had now become a highlight of her days. As she left the office, the city lights beginning to glow against the dusky sky, Emma reflected on how something as seemingly trivial as a selfie in the bathroom had grown into a series of interactions layered with respect, curiosity, and subtle tension. What had started as a moment of seeking validation for an outfit had now evolved into a professional dynamic enriched with personal awareness, unspoken intrigue, and mutual acknowledgement, creating a unique connection that neither had fully explored but both were drawn toward, and she realized that tomorrow, like today, would carry with it a new opportunity to navigate this delicate balance between professionalism and personal engagement, excitement and composure, anticipation and decorum, all within the boundaries of a corporate office environment that had somehow become a space for quiet exploration of connection, mutual respect, and the thrilling possibilities that lay in the subtle intersections of their daily lives, leaving her both exhilarated and quietly reflective as she stepped into the cool evening air and headed home, already thinking about the moments that awaited her with Daniel in the coming days. The following morning, Emma arrived earlier than usual, the quiet hum of the office building greeting her as she stepped into the lobby, a mixture of anticipation and focus settling over her as she navigated toward her desk, coffee in hand, her mind replaying the small, charged interactions from the previous days and wondering how the morning might unfold with Daniel, whose presence had become both a comfort and a source of subtle tension she could neither ignore nor fully control. She arranged her workspace with her usual meticulous care, though her thoughts kept drifting to the way he had looked during their last meeting, the faint smile he had offered, and the intensity in his gaze when he acknowledged her contributions, reminding her that their relationship had quietly shifted into a delicate balance of professionalism, curiosity, and an unspoken awareness of each other that made ordinary office tasks feel slightly electric. As she settled at her desk, she noticed Daniel entering the main floor, carrying a tablet and a cup of coffee, moving with his usual confident stride that commanded attention without effort, and for a fleeting moment, she paused to observe him, noting how seamlessly he seemed to inhabit both the authority of his role and the subtle charm that drew people in, including her, and she felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervous energy at the thought of the interactions the day might bring. Their morning briefing began promptly, with team members discussing updates, pending tasks, and upcoming deadlines, but Emma found herself acutely aware of Daniel's presence, his calm yet commanding tone anchoring the discussion while his occasional glances at her seemed to convey an unspoken acknowledgement of the attention she had brought to each detail, a quiet affirmation of her contributions that made her heart race slightly while keeping the atmosphere entirely professional. During a short break between agenda points, Daniel approached her desk with a folder in hand, leaning casually against the edge as if drawn to her presence while maintaining a professional distance, and said, "I thought you might want to review these before our next meeting." She accepted the documents, feeling the brief contact of their hands as she took them, and though the gesture was entirely innocent, her pulse quickened, a reminder of the subtle tension that had grown between them, an awareness that neither had yet fully explored but both seemed to understand. As they collaborated on the presentation slides, adjusting layouts and refining wording, Emma noticed how effortlessly their workflow synchronized, a shared understanding forming silently, punctuated by fleeting eye contact, brief smiles, and moments of comfortable silence where words were unnecessary. Each interaction built a rhythm, a cadence of trust, respect, and quiet intrigue that made the work itself feel secondary to the connection that had begun to take shape. The morning progressed, and Emma found herself navigating emails, calls, and scheduling adjustments while keeping a constant awareness of Daniel's proximity, noting how he managed his team, interacted with clients, and maintained his calm authority, all while subtly acknowledging her presence through nods, casual comments, and occasional smiles that made her feel recognized in a way she had never experienced before in a professional environment. During lunch, they returned to the office lounge, where Daniel suggested reviewing a few key points of the afternoon presentation while enjoying coffee, and Emma felt the familiar excitement that came with these shared moments, appreciating the way he included her in discussions, valued her insights, and created a professional yet personal space where collaboration was infused with subtle connection. As they sat side by side, passing documents back and forth, their hands brushed occasionally, and though neither made a comment on it, the sensation carried with it an unspoken acknowledgement of the growing awareness between them, a silent agreement that their dynamic had evolved beyond simple workplace interaction into something quietly charged with mutual respect, curiosity, and intrigue. The afternoon meetings brought more challenges, including a sudden client request requiring immediate adjustments to the presentation, and Emma found herself working closely with Daniel to address the concerns, coordinating slides, data points, and visuals with precision, while maintaining the rhythm of their shared focus that seemed to blend seamlessly with the subtle tension of awareness, making every movement, glance, and exchange feel layered with meaning beyond the tasks at hand. By mid-afternoon, the office had quieted somewhat, and Emma realized that she had been acutely aware of Daniel's presence for most of the day, noting not just his professional efficiency but the way he acknowledged her without words, a silent reinforcement of the connection that had begun with a simple selfie, evolved through shared tasks, and now infused every moment of their interactions with anticipation, excitement, and a quietly thrilling tension. Later, as she was finalizing documents for the end-of-day review, Daniel appeared at her desk again, holding a small stack of papers and giving her a brief nod of recognition. "Great work today," he said simply, his tone professional yet carrying the warmth that had become familiar, and she felt a rush of pride and quiet thrill, realizing that their interactions had created a pattern of subtle acknowledgement and mutual respect that both empowered and intrigued her. As the day drew to a close, Emma noticed a message from Daniel: "Coffee tomorrow before the first meeting." A small smile tugged at her lips, and she responded quickly, confirming, feeling a rush of excitement at the thought of starting another day with the shared connection that had quietly developed over the past week. Walking to the elevator, she reflected on how much had changed since that morning when she had sent a selfie, wondering how a single, simple gesture could have set off a chain of events that transformed the professional environment into a space where subtle tension, respect, and mutual curiosity coexisted harmoniously, leaving her both exhilarated and contemplative about the possibilities that lay ahead. The elevator doors closed, and as she descended, Emma realized that the balance they had created, professional, safe, yet charged with quiet intrigue, was delicate, requiring attention, awareness, and discretion, but she also understood that it was uniquely theirs, a rhythm of connection, respect, and anticipation that had quietly taken root and would continue to shape her days, interactions, and perception of Daniel in ways both thrilling and profoundly grounding, leaving her with a sense of excitement for tomorrow, when the office would once again become the backdrop for subtle exploration, shared focus, and the quiet development of something more meaningful than either had expected. The next morning arrived with a crispness in the air that seemed to mirror Emma's heightened awareness as she entered the office, her heart already racing slightly at the thought of the coffee meeting with Daniel before the first briefing, a ritual that had quickly become the most anticipated part of her day and one that brought with it both excitement and a sense of cautious curiosity. She moved through the lobby with a practiced composure, though inside, her thoughts were a swirl of anticipation and reflection on how far their dynamic had evolved from a single selfie into a pattern of subtle, meaningful connection that permeated every interaction, every glance, and every shared task, giving her both a thrill and a comforting sense of being seen and valued. As she approached the small office kitchen where Daniel was already waiting with 2 steaming cups of coffee, she felt her pulse quicken, not from fear, but from the undeniable magnetism of his presence, his calm authority softened by the warmth of a smile that seemed reserved just for her, and the quiet confidence with which he held himself made the simple act of sharing coffee feel charged with meaning, as if they were inhabiting a space slightly removed from the demands of the office, a private world within the public setting of their professional lives. "Good morning," he said, his voice casual yet deliberate, and she returned the greeting, trying to mask the flutter in her chest, while noticing the subtle way he adjusted the handle of his cup, a small gesture that somehow seemed significant in the context of their developing awareness of one another. They discussed the agenda for the morning briefing, reviewing points and clarifying details with the same seamless teamwork that had become their norm, each exchange punctuated by brief glances, small smiles, and moments of silence that carried the weight of unspoken recognition and shared understanding, a rhythm of interaction that was professional yet undeniably personal, respectful yet quietly charged. As the team gathered in the boardroom for the briefing, Emma noticed how Daniel's focus seemed to shift just slightly whenever he caught her eye, his words carrying the same authority as always, but layered with subtle acknowledgement, making her feel simultaneously empowered and keenly aware of the connection that had quietly taken root between them. Throughout the session, their brief exchanges, sliding a chart across the table, nodding toward a key point, offering a clarifying comment, felt charged with a silent dialogue that only they understood, a blend of professional collaboration and personal awareness that elevated the ordinary into something nuanced, engaging, and quietly thrilling. The morning continued with client calls and scheduling adjustments, yet Emma's attention remained partially anchored to the rhythm of their interaction, noticing how Daniel navigated challenges with ease, handled questions with a calm authority, and occasionally offered subtle gestures of recognition, a nod, a smile, a brief touch of a folder, that reminded her that their connection was acknowledged, appreciated, and carefully nurtured within the boundaries of professionalism. During a brief lull in activity, Daniel approached her desk, leaning casually with a folder in hand, and remarked, "I think we're aligned on the proposal, but your perspective is always valuable." As she took the folder, their fingers brushed briefly, sending a familiar jolt through her, one that was entirely safe yet unmistakably present, a reminder that their shared awareness was becoming a defining feature of their days together. By mid-afternoon, the office had quieted slightly, and Emma found herself reflecting on how much her perception of Daniel had shifted over the past week. He was no longer just a demanding, charismatic CEO, but a colleague who valued her insights, noticed her presence, and created subtle moments of connection that made the workplace feel simultaneously dynamic, respectful, and quietly charged with tension. As they worked side by side on the final slides for an important presentation, the energy between them seemed almost tangible, the shared focus on details, data, and delivery punctuated by fleeting moments of eye contact, smiles, and subtle gestures that conveyed more than words ever could, creating a professional intimacy that was both safe and exhilarating, a delicate balance they navigated effortlessly. The late afternoon brought unexpected feedback from a client, prompting an impromptu revision session, and Emma and Daniel moved seamlessly into problem-solving mode, coordinating adjustments, reviewing numbers, and refining visuals while maintaining the same rhythm of interaction that had become their hallmark: professional, attentive, collaborative, and quietly intimate, with each touch, glance, and word carrying the weight of shared awareness. When the final adjustments were complete, Daniel looked at her with a brief smile, one that conveyed acknowledgement, approval, and a subtle warmth that Emma had come to recognize as uniquely his, and she felt a rush of pride mixed with anticipation, realizing that their professional collaboration had grown into something deeply engaging, meaningful, and quietly thrilling, a connection that neither had fully defined but both intuitively understood. As the office began to empty, Emma prepared to leave, her thoughts lingering on the series of interactions that had defined the day. The subtle nods, the shared glances, the quiet affirmations, and she felt a sense of satisfaction and excitement for the continuation of this delicate dance that blended professionalism with awareness, curiosity, and respect. Just as she was about to step into the elevator, her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel: "Brief tomorrow morning. Coffee first, as usual." A smile tugged at her lips, and she replied immediately, confirming, feeling a mix of anticipation and warmth at the thought of sharing another morning moment with him, a quiet ritual that had become a highlight of her days. Stepping into the evening air, Emma reflected on how a single selfie had sparked a series of events that now defined the rhythm of their workdays, a professional environment subtly transformed into a space where attention, respect, and mutual curiosity created a connection that was exhilarating, grounding, and deeply satisfying, leaving her both eager and contemplative about what tomorrow might bring. In the quiet of her apartment, she considered how Daniel's consistent attention, small gestures, and subtle acknowledgments had shifted her perception of her work, the office, and their interactions, creating a landscape where collaboration and personal awareness intersected in ways that were engaging, safe, and profoundly stimulating, and she felt a growing sense of excitement for the continuation of their shared rhythm, the unspoken tension that neither had crossed but both felt keenly, and the possibilities that lay ahead as their connection deepened within the professional boundaries that had become their playground for subtle intimacy, mutual respect, and a quietly thrilling anticipation of moments yet to come. The following morning, Emma arrived at the office with her usual careful composure, but beneath the professional exterior, she felt a flutter of anticipation she could no longer ignore, the routine coffee ritual with Daniel before the first meeting having become something she looked forward to with a mix of excitement and nervous curiosity. The sunlight spilling through the large windows reflected off the polished floors, casting long streaks of gold that seemed to mirror the warmth in her chest as she approached the lounge, where Daniel was already waiting with 2 cups of freshly brewed coffee, his presence calm, commanding, yet subtly inviting, a combination that made the simple act of sharing a morning drink feel charged with quiet meaning. "Good morning," he said, his tone casual but layered with the familiarity that had developed over the past week, and Emma returned the greeting with a small smile, her fingers brushing briefly against his as she accepted her cup, a moment so ordinary to an observer yet electric to them both. a reminder of how far their connection had grown since that first impulsive selfie, which had now evolved into a pattern of subtle acknowledgement, mutual awareness, and quiet intrigue that colored every interaction in the office. They discussed the agenda for the first meeting, reviewing points and clarifying tasks with the same seamless collaboration that had become their hallmark, each word, glance, and gesture carrying an unspoken layer of familiarity and respect. Emma felt a thrill in the effortless way they worked together, noticing how Daniel adjusted his tone and posture slightly whenever he caught her attention, how his eyes lingered for a fraction longer on her when acknowledging a contribution, and how the rhythm of their interactions had become both professional and quietly personal, a dynamic that neither could ignore. As the team gathered for the morning briefing, Emma observed Daniel's command of the room, his clarity of thought, and his ability to engage the group, yet she also noticed the subtle ways he interacted with her, nodding slightly at her suggestions, smiling briefly when she contributed, and creating spaces in the discussion for her input, which made her feel valued, noticed, and integral to the process in a way that went beyond ordinary professional acknowledgement. During a mid-morning break, Daniel approached her desk with a folder, leaning casually as he handed it to her and remarked, "I know you'll handle this perfectly," his voice professional yet infused with a warmth that sent a quiet thrill through her, and as their fingers brushed, Emma felt a familiar jolt of awareness, a reminder of the subtle tension, curiosity, and connection that had been quietly building between them, a presence that was safe, respectful, and entirely thrilling. The rest of the morning passed in a series of coordinated efforts, client calls, and presentation refinements, with Emma acutely aware of how their shared focus and seamless teamwork had created an unspoken rhythm, a quiet intimacy woven into the fabric of their professional collaboration, where each glance, smile, and small gesture carried meaning that went beyond the tasks themselves, deepening the connection that had started with a single, casual moment and grown into something undeniable yet entirely appropriate for the office. By afternoon, the office had quieted somewhat, and Emma found herself working closely with Daniel to finalize slides for an important client presentation, their collaboration smooth and effortless, punctuated by brief moments of eye contact, subtle smiles, and gestures that conveyed respect, awareness, and quiet acknowledgement of the connection that had evolved between them, creating a sense of shared understanding that was both motivating and thrilling, leaving her fully engaged in the work while simultaneously aware of the nuanced interplay of attention and presence between them. When the final edits were complete, Daniel looked at her with a small, approving smile, and said, "Excellent work, Emma. This will impress them." His words were professional, yet the warmth and subtle personal acknowledgement behind them made her heart lift, a reminder that the dynamic they had developed was more than just a professional partnership. It was a quietly shared space where mutual respect, subtle tension, and personal awareness coexisted harmoniously, making even routine office tasks feel meaningful and engaging. As the day wound down and employees began leaving, Emma prepared her workspace for the next morning, reflecting on how much had changed over the past week. A simple selfie had sparked a connection that had grown through shared tasks, brief gestures, and subtle acknowledgement, a professional environment quietly transformed into a space where attention, respect, and unspoken curiosity created an experience that was both thrilling and grounding. Just as she was about to leave, Daniel appeared at her desk, offering a cup of coffee as he remarked, "You handled today perfectly. Ready for tomorrow." She accepted the cup, smiling softly, feeling the familiar flutter in her chest as their fingers brushed once more, and nodded, realizing that their ritual, their connection, and the dynamic they had cultivated were now integral to her days, leaving her both exhilarated and reflective about the possibilities that lay ahead. Walking through the quiet office, she thought about the journey from that first, impulsive selfie to the rhythm of shared mornings, collaborative tasks, and subtle moments of acknowledgement, understanding that their connection had grown organically, safely, and beautifully, a delicate balance of professionalism, awareness, and personal intrigue that neither had forced but both had nurtured, and she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that what had started as a simple question about an outfit had evolved into a meaningful, engaging, and safe relationship built on trust, respect, and mutual curiosity. By the time she stepped out into the evening air, the city lights twinkling against the dusky sky, Emma felt a sense of closure and excitement simultaneously, understanding that the foundation they had built, the shared focus, subtle acknowledgements, professional respect, and quiet tension, would continue to grow and evolve, creating a unique, thrilling, and satisfying connection that was entirely their own, safe, and wholly engaging within the professional boundaries of the office, leaving her with anticipation for the next morning, the next shared coffee, and the continuing journey of subtle discovery, mutual respect, and quiet, exhilarating awareness that had quietly transformed her workdays into something unforgettable.